My superpower is engineering. I've been a roboticist almost all my life now. I think engineering is just as creative as the arts. Engineers, we solve problems. It impacts the world. It makes a difference. Without IEEE, I don't think I would have the network that I have. Anyone can get involved with IEEE USA at any time. There's an immense amount of value for anyone at any career stage.
Good afternoon, everyone, and thanks for tuning in to today's IEEE USA Livestream webinar, Becoming a Licensed Engineer, Advantages and First Steps. I'm your host, Jonathan Cho. IEEE USA's goal is to create programming that is valuable, relevant, and of interest to you. As such, we will be sending a short survey to all registrants after this event and would love your feedback. We value your opinions and would appreciate it if you could take a few minutes and share your thoughts. Joining us today is IEEE member Bob Becknell, professional engineer. Bob, an associate technical fellow for the Boeing Company on autonomous systems in St. Louis, with an expertise in command and control communications. Since joining Boeing in 2005, he supported or led projects in cellular technology and RF networking for military and homeland security customers. Bob also currently serves as the IEEE Region 5 Director and is a professional engineer licensed in the state of Missouri. Without further ado, I will now pass it off to our presenter. Welcome, Bob.
Thank you, Jonathan. And we look forward to a great topic here this afternoon. And my understanding is there's a chat window open, but my email address is provided here at the introduction. If you think of questions afterwards, feel free to contact me. And without further ado, let's start with a textbook definition of licensure. And this is Bob Becknell's textbook, but quite simply, practice of engineering as defined by the respective jurisdiction. And from my perspective here, and the context for this presentation, that jurisdiction is a state, one of the 50 states, District of Columbia, Guam, Virgin Islands, etc. And so what you see there in the background, FANET, is actually a snapshot of the definition by the state of Missouri legally. And so, when you get a bunch of lawyers together, they can make a definition quite cumbersome. But for this presentation, we'll keep it simple, and we're going to look at it from this angle. So one of the things I typically where this starts, and just a little background here, I typically will give this presentation at least once a year to undergraduates at a university where I'm an adjunct for the FE review course. And so this my typical pitch is to kind of explain the benefits to licensure. And so these are just some bullets that there's not one size fits all, but everybody has a unique circumstances here. And I think what it boils down to is really that last bullet. And I don't mean to be kind of come across flip or crass for professional engineers, but typically engineers go in and want to become a professional engineer, not only to protect the health, safety, and welfare of individuals, but further advance their career, and that means additional income and job opportunities. But going down here, depending on what area that you do practice, consulting, I start there at the top. You'll find that in the world of consulting in private practice, that tends to be where you have the greatest density of professional engineers practicing. And as you work down, you have some unique circumstances. For example, owning a firm in the state of Missouri, to own an engineering firm, you have to be a professional engineer. That may vary by state. To be a forensics engineer and to be an expert witness to testify in court, typically you need to be a professional engineer. So different situations for everybody there. And moreover to that, a lot of that is why we pursue licensure. And again, looking at that last bullet on the previous slide, recognition, growth, authority, mobility, and money, the kind of rolls up to why we often want to pursue licensure. But in order to kind of look at the professional engineer as so being the highest calling of engineering, so to speak, there's always some admirable goals associated with achieving licensure. And again, protecting the health, safety, and welfare of the public is key. So today I'm going to kind of reference a number of organizations throughout this topic. And I want to just kind of set the stage of their importance here. And starting with ABET, we're going to talk a little bit about accreditation later. And ABET is that accreditation agency that does that. And more specifically, it's the Engineering Accreditation Commission within ABET that accredits undergraduate engineering programs in the United States. NCEES, that they're going to be the ones to actually develop and proctor FE and PE exams. Again, we'll look at those a little bit later. IEEE USA and National Society of Professional Engineers, two organizations that do promote licensure. And then of course the licensing boards, every state does have a licensing board, and so we'll kind of keep this pretty much US centric, although there is licensure that goes beyond the US borders. So like as Jonathan was saying, I'm licensed in Missouri. So when I have examples here, I'm going to typically rely on Missouri, but this will apply to every state for the most part. And so every state has its own definition of engineering and licensure, a professional engineer. A number of those are defined in state law. In Missouri, we have Chapter 327. You can certainly pull that link up, but I encourage you to go to your respective state for those that are licensed to understand specifically what defines engineering, what defines licensure, what type of practicing of engineering is included in your state. In some cases, you might be surprised to learn what's not covered. And so that is a homework assignment that I would encourage you to take on. Likewise, every state has an enforcement body, and in Missouri, that's the Board for Architects, Professional Engineers, Professional Landscape Surveyors, and Professional Landscape Architects. That kind of varies by state. There in the example of Illinois, they have a dedicated board for professional engineers, but there will be some board that will provide enforcement. They're the ones that are going to determine if you have sufficient work experience to be a PE, if you have the correct education, and so forth. Now, moving to the organizations, they will and here's I reference both IEEE USA and NSPE, but they each have a position they take on licensure. And you can go pull these down afterwards, but they each more or less support licensure. And IEEE USA even defines the title, the use of the word engineer, as in line with most state boards. So that is kind of the role of the organization, and I'll touch on each of these in a moment. With NSPE here being first, I want to recognize NSPE because they were really the organization from the start that really got licensure going. Their founder, David Steinman, in the 30s organized a number of states to fill in a gap where engineering licensure was not was missing. And so from that, he started the National Society of Professional Engineers, and from there, that snowballed into every state defining engineering to some extent. as well as a national organization that still exists today. The ethics of NSPE, their code of ethics, which is really considered a gold standard among ethics that have been codified. It's cited quite often in different literature, different organizations, and different venues, and so this 2-page document, which you can download as a PDF, I would highly encourage you to use it a reference in your office or among your peers for not just engineering, but for any areas where ethics is relevant. So licensure has evolved over time for a number of reasons, but most specifically, it's come about through some specific disaster, and usually it's a disaster within a specific state, where the state then takes action to generate a, um, a definition of engineering and pass some type of legislation. And here's four accounts of some fairly well-known disasters that have led to some outcome related to either enhancing licensure or uh, or recognizing the responsibility of an engineer. And so the first one here in Texas, and this is just an example from the 1930s of a school that uh, very very simply, this was a school that they were using the re- the secondhand gas to keep their school, and so they had an area that wasn't well ventilated below the floor. There was an area between the floor and the ground, and it wasn't well vented, and so there was not proper attention to hooking up to the proper natural gas line, and so they were using the kind of the return gas, which was kind of not real reliable, and as a result, a large disaster occurred, which led to Texas developing its engineering licensure laws. I think many of us can remember the space shuttle disaster, Space Shuttle Challenger. While this did not directly lead to licensure, the outcome did lead to the grounding of the fleet for a while to study the problem, which was an O-ring problem with on a cold day. But the overall arching concern was that management, in the case of NASA, was not listening to the concern and to the problems escalated up through the engineering staff. And so the individual who brought forward the whistleblower, he went through a lot of emotional problems afterwards, and he had you can read about what he encountered, and he was really the epitome of a whistleblower with a strong backbone. The Hyatt Regency Walkway, this occurred in Missouri in the 1980s, right at the start of the decade, in Kansas City, and so this walkway collapsed from during a party where there was just too many individuals on the walkway to be supported by the engineering design, and it really wasn't the engineering design, but the engineer approved a a not very appropriate type spec sheet for the structure. And so the outcome there was the engineer employed by the firm lost their license, and then permanently, at least in Missouri. And so there is an obligation, if you do practice engineering, to adhere to the state laws, or you can be found where not only perhaps receive jail time, but you could lose your license, which for many is their livelihood. And then lastly, a dam. This was earlier in the century, in more rural at the time Los Angeles, but this was a case where insufficient concrete was used for the dam, and you had an example of a public works individual that was self-trained and became the site engineer and just was practicing outside of his area of expertise, and a resort resulted in a large disaster in the area of, a large flood that where the dam broke and flooded a large area of at the time it was fairly rural, but it was the Los Angeles area. So we know over time from these disasters and just the momentum, you can see that licensure laws have been introduced in all 50 states. And you can kind of see that it was really a snowball effect. And you can kind of see really starting in 1917, you just had really mul- you had at least 5 to 10 states each decade uh, sign, signing into law their kind of landmark engineering law. And so, in order to have our licensure laws, you know, it wasn't nowadays. We have a process where we actually test. We have a work experience requirement, and then you have a second test, and that's been pretty much the plan since the 60s. But when you actually rolled out these engineering laws, you didn't have an examination. So a lot of time went through, a lot of learning curve and best practices to get to the point where we have the kind of the general process we have now. Now there are some variations at each state, and I'll identify a few of the bigger ones. But for the since really the mid 60s there, when you had your main exams, your chemical, your civil, electrical, and mechanical exams come into play, and your FE there, you've had a fairly well established process. And so what is that process? And so we have it kind of boiled this down, and it used to be where when I did this, I could pretty much just do option 1 and 3. Option 2 is fairly recent. And so what is option 1? That's kind of been the established process for a long time, but and it was there when I got licensed in the mid 90s. But it's the bachelor's degree from an accredited program and your FE exam, either that senior year of college or just right after graduation, and then you get your 4 years of experience based on your graduation date, and then you qualify if that that experience is sufficient, and you qualify to take the principles and practice exam, which is your PE exam, and then that passage qualifies you to become a professional engineer. However, what we've had since then, and more recently, and a number of states have gotten behind this for a couple of reasons. One is to support those that are in the military who move around a lot, where it may not be realistic to establish experience of 4 years in one location, and so the examination becomes the second exam, the PE exam, becomes much more difficult. So a number of organizations and states have gotten behind this decoupling effort where the PE exam can be taken once your FE is complete, well before your 4 years of experience has been received. And I think that's a good approach. You have the ability to take that exam. There's a lot of material in your PE exam that carries forward from your FE. So that piece can be tested and satisfied, leaving you to just obtain your experience. And then lastly, in some states, again, I reference Missouri, they do allow this an MS degree, MS engineering degree will eliminate one of your years of experience, 4 years of experience being the typical amount. And with an MS degree in engineering, some states have reduced that to 3, equating a year of study to be a year of experience. So accreditation has been on the kind of the burden on ABET to perform, and accreditation is really around these criterions at the moment. These periodically get updated, but these are the areas that are evaluated for in undergraduate and sometimes graduate engineering programs. And engineering schools go through these periodically, every 3, 4, 5 years, where they have to requalify to get audited. And so it's a it's a large uh, labor task for them to go through, but they do that because there's a advantage to be able to promote that their program is ABET accredited. Some schools have elected not to do that, but this is the process. And ABET has gotten beyond the U.S. I believe some countries have looked at ABET as a model and are using them in some of the various universities. So what does ABET do? So took a snapshot of a couple schools here in the St. Louis area that I'm associated with, and this is what they'll do. They'll come in and they will accredit the program. So a school may have some programs they accredit it and some they don't. And so you can see in this case, this was sent, the date there on the left is the date they first receive accreditation, and it's been reoccurring. And this is all found, and you can query the ABET website for your favorite school. But this is what you would see, and more specifically, the profile that the public can see here. Here's Washington University in St. Louis. You can see when their next review is. The important piece there is that they're accredited by the Engineering Accreditation Commission, and this one's for the electrical and electronics engineering. But you'll see civil, mechanical programs and so forth. So starting with the FE exam, and really what's occurred in the last I believe I believe it's been since 2014, but the FE exam has been modified to be discipline specific. So you see on the right there, those 7 disciplines are what the fundamentals of engineering exam will cover. And what the fundamentals of engineering exam test, it tests your knowledge of essentially the material you learned as an undergraduate engineer, regardless of your discipline. And so your everything from your first courses in calculus, through differential equations, through physics, through chemistry, and then all of your associated engineering courses are found, and we'll see a specification here of what that actually is. But that makes up this FE exam. And that's right now, I believe it was since 2020, the exams, I'm sorry, 2018, the exams have become computer based. So not only have they become discipline specific, they are now where you can go to a Pearson VUE test center and actually sit down at a terminal and take the exam, and you receive your results in an estimated 7 to 10 days. So it's very nice now. I don't want to go into the difficulties of the past of the pencil and paper type exam, but it's much improved all around. And that's my opinion. So I'll provide those as needed. So as I mentioned, I I give this presentation to undergraduates at least once a year, and so I do an FE review course. I do the electrical piece of the FE course, and I I I try to spend a lot of time on this. I know this audience is going to have a broad representation, but taking 4 years of a typical program, I try to steer students, depending on the class level they are, to looking at some of these as goals. And the first thing there, you know, this is obviously becoming an IEEE member is important, but creating that profile, that record in NCSS, which I'll mention here momentarily, is very important because it starts the ball rolling of starting to document your experience and other information that's needed eventually. And this goes through with the focus of taking your FE by your senior year, or actually, taking it once you become a senior. So upon your end of your junior year exams, you could schedule through NCSS to take that exam. And so that's the ideal window to take it, when that material is fresh in your mind. And over that summer, I encourage students, that junior to senior jump is very important, because if you do it after your senior year, you're starting a new job or you're starting grad school, you have a lot of other things on your mind. And so that ideal window is that summer of their junior to senior year. But regardless, anytime one can complete that exam, it's well worth it. And so and I'm just looking at the electrical and computer exam, since this is IEEE, but you can go into NCSS and pull down the specification. And what you would see is, out of 110 questions, this is the range of questions in those knowledge areas that you would be tested upon. And so you can kind of see, if you went through the double E program in the past, these align very closely to courses you probably have taken. And so you can look at the pass rates of the FE. This is posted on the NCSS site every year. It gets updated. So from June, this looks at the past year, and you can kind of see, and that these pass rates fluctuate, but for the past year, you can kind of see what is the passing rate for the various disciplines. And what's interesting is the volume. This volume, very, very interesting. When I was updating this slide versus the 2021 data, the volume actually decreased. So there was, from 20 to 2021, there was a much more, a noticeably larger volume of people taking the exam. And I think so in 2020, I believe the tests were canceled, obviously because of COVID. So you had that built up queue of individuals that wanted to take that exam. So I put this in here because I came across it on the NCSS site, but for those that are graduates of various engineering schools, these are the larger schools in terms of number of seniors that are taking an FE. And first there's the school out of Rolla, Missouri, Missouri University of Science and Technology, and it's a little blurry. That's 646, and this is from the NCSS publication in 2021. But you can kind of see those are some of the larger schools in the U.S. and so they're also, it's important to note that a lot of schools do impress upon students to be taking their FE in their senior year before they graduate, which I think is great, because that's really what, again, when students need to take it. And if schools are getting behind that, that's even better. So I do a just stepping back for a moment. I do a lot of kind of coaching at Boeing with people that wish to take the PE, or maybe they're starting the process. They're fresh out of school and they haven't taken the FE. And so one of the big questions that comes up is, and it becomes and these individuals are looking at the requirements. They will look at the fact that 4 years of experience, and that's 4 years of engineering experience, is required. In the past, that has been fairly rigid in terms of that experience had to be under a supervisor that was a professional engineer. I believe, over the years, boards, and this is my opinion, but and an observation, but boards have kind of slowly backed off of that and have loosened up that rigidity, knowing that a lot of, and especially in areas of industry, a lot of areas where you don't have a supervisor that's a PE, but the individual is still doing, gathering experience that equates to what, a practicing engineer is doing. So that experience can really be, uh, it can be both design and analysis oriented. It doesn't have to, you don't have to be a design engineer to satisfy the requirements in most cases to become a PE. If you're for example, you're a test engineer and you're doing a lot of analysis, you're you don't have to think second about attempting the PE because of the work experience. Basically, if you can describe your activity in terms of I calculated, I designed, I analyzed, I recommended, you can almost be assured that you are describing design and analysis. I should say design and or analysis. That actually comes from the Texas board uh, website. And what I usually will say is, you know, as you or as you're early in the period of starting your work experiences, to check out the most likely state you're going to seek a PE in, and either call them, look on their website, or visit them to find out what their specifics are on what they consider experience. So but that again, don't let the fact that you're not designing something, which is usually what the first thought of an engineer is they design things. And if you're not designing, but you can't get a PE. The second question is, and I'll this is probably a good place as any, is for those that may be in industry, or possibly government, or maybe even education. What's the advantage of getting a PE? And so, I usually equate it. Uh, one reason is you don't know what the future holds for you, and it just opens additional doors for you if you want to, for mobility. You want to look at another career. You want to perhaps you want to expand your employer's current service offerings. And by getting a PE, you can do that. They can look at areas that they may not have looked at before. You also, even if the company never uses your services as a PE, a lot of managers will consider that an admirable goal. And if you satisfy that, there could still be a reciprocating promotion or income increase for that. And so explaining the benefits of licensure to your manager in advance, during your review or any type of coaching, you can explain to them the importance, and sell them on the fact that you're obtaining a PE on your time, and or during work hours. And it does go a long way for somebody in education. Just the ability to be able to tell your students that you're a PE goes a long way. A lot of students, we learn, that have gone through college, don't always have the luxury of having a a class or a instructor that actually was a PE and could talk about the what licensure does in as a career. And so a lot of students maybe leave the university without that knowledge. But if you have that PE, you have that title, a lot of students may seek you out on campus, or you have them in your class. It's a good discussion to have with them. So now we move to the PE exam. So we've looked at the education, the FE exam, experience, and the PE exam. So this is kind of step 4 if we're going to look at 5-step process. And for the electrical and electronic, or electrical and computer engineering, which it's usually kind of lumped under now, there's 3 formats, and it's a format where you have there's a piece where you'll have a enough overlap in all 3, but then they'll diverge into other areas. So if we step back and look at what all the available principles and practice of engineering exams that are available, and again, these are produced by NCWS, the 3 that kind of fit the typical makeup of an IEEE member are shown there in red. Obviously, we have members that are mechanical, fire protection engineers, so I don't want to leave anyone out, but I kind of tried to highlight three particular exams that an IEEE member, and doing that, creating this chart to show some pass rates. And so just like the FE, these pass rates are fluid. They vary quite a bit from year to year. And what's nice about this data, you can kind of see, the first time, and then if somebody comes back and takes it again. And you can take the PE multiple times just as well as the FE. So don't be discouraged if at first you don't succeed. And so this kind of shows what that type of data might be. But the all these exams are now computer based. And so here's kind of a snapshot of a number of pieces of data for those exams. And if you go to your NCWS site, you download an examinee guide, which kind of gives this information. But they're all computer based. They're the FE is 110 questions, but the others are 85, and then the one in power is 80. The and incidentally, the power exam is the most popular of the electrical engineering exams, and it's actually offered more than once a year. So the FE is offered all year round. Most of the others right now are, for lack of a number of examinees, they're offered once a year, and they're computer based, and then the power is year round as well. And you can sign up for those on the NCWS site, which I'll mention here momentarily. But just like the FE, there are specifications that you can go in and download to look at what the course topics are. And so if you're going to go and review, and I didn't want to spend a lot of time on this slide deck on talking about the perhaps review material that's out there. There's a number of suppliers out there that provide that, but usually, they'll go out and they'll look at these specifications and they'll design their material around that. So that I mentioned for the when I was going through the kind of the student process during their 4 years of college, but this goes for anyone. This is the NCWS account. This is, you go out there now. It's called a My NCWS account. It's a free setup. You create it. I highly encourage you to do it, regardless of whether you're, you know, where you're at in that process. this really is a one-stop shop to retain all your information. It's getting much better, but it also allows you to, as you can see, register for exams. Your results would be officially published here, but you can also record your continuing education courses. You can transfer if you're going to get multi-state type licenses. This makes it easy to transfer to those states, lets you collect and retain the reference, letters of reference and things like that. So I can't say enough about this service, and it is free. Also in there is where you're going to download any reference handbooks. So typically your FE and your PE exams will permit one document. It's closed book exam, but there is a reference guide that is available. So when you take the test, it's on the terminal as a PDF, and it's a pretty sizable reference handbook. So if you create when you create your account, you can go in and see those what they are. So they're valuable pieces of reference. Even if you don't take the FE or the PE, it still can be a useful reference. And then I mentioned about the examinee guide, which kind of gives the logistics of taking the exam. That's kind of the first document that you would take when you kind of are starting the process. That's going to tell you, how to register. The It's going to have information that I presented in here. It's also going to give details on your what type of calculators you can use, what type of reference handbook, and things like that. So last on this 5-step plan here is sustainment, and really that's retaining your continuing education. And believe it or not all states require this. I did recall seeing Connecticut has no continuing education requirement, but most states do. I know in Missouri, and I think this is fairly common now, is there's 30 professional development hours every 2 years, but they will vary. Every state has some twists and turns on what's approved type courses. Some have a set amount of ethics, some a set amount of type soft skills, and then some, like Missouri, don't really have any restrictions. But this is something that you would definitely want to do. And again, the CPC, the continuing professional competency, which is just a fancy way of saying continuing education, can be retained in your my NCWS record. And if you, in the event you do get audited, and some states will audit your hours, make sure they're approved, satisfying the requirements of that state. You can refer to them that website. I believe there's a way to just send them the link, and they can go and look at the information. And there's nothing further to do if you meet their requirements during the audit. And secondly, to sustaining a PE, I kind of I feel another part of this is giving back to the profession, and that's gonna there's so many permutations of what that could be, but very simply getting involved, advocating to others taking the FE or PE. You could even do things like volunteer for ABET. Those ABET boards are made up mostly of volunteers going to universities. You can volunteer with NCWS to write exams. So all that requires somebody, and usually a PE is required. So you're in a position to do so. Sitting on different boards of organizations is another area where the PE might be a requirement, and just being there to talk to somebody about the exam. And so as I wind down here, let's look at maybe some next steps that you could take. And this is going to vary, of course, where you're at in the process. But creating that NCWS record, you could do that today. And if you're on the fence, or you're kind of still thinking about it, going the next step in determining the eligibility and the state requirements. And and like I said, visit the state board for your particular state if you're going in the path of getting a PE. If you're going to take the FE, that's going to be standard for any state. So let's just put that out there. The FE is the same FE whether it's in Minnesota or Missouri or Maine. Once you take that FE, it can be used as step one for your licensure path for any state. You might want to go some states will allow you to become recognized as an EIT, an engineer in training. Sometimes it's referred to as engineer intern. That's simply taking your FE score, sending it to the state, and requesting a a certificate. Essentially, it might be a a 10 or $20 charge, but it just it gives you a nice certificate to hang on your in your office. But it has no legal bearing until you actually become licensed. Next step, once you create your record, document your work experience and your references. You probably have that pretty handy. And then while you're in there, you can review the latest NCSS examinee guide. Right now it's June 10th. That gets updated to at least once a year. Used to be at the end of the year. Looks like now they're maybe it's more frequently. And then if you are starting that path of taking one of the exams, just uh, you know work on your experience but start to study and prepare for whichever exam you might want to take. If you've taken the exam, I'd encourage, and you're a PE, I'd highly encourage you to get involved in some of the maybe those examples I showed. Maybe get active with IEEE and promote licensure or your local university, and where perhaps work with some of the students. And if you want to get involved with IEEE, there's and IEEE USA is just a subset of IEEE, but there's three big areas that probably you could start getting involved today, regardless of where you stood on licensure. But get involved with your branch. If you're an educator, get active with the branch. Seek out who the branch counselor is if you're not that person already, or some of the students. And if it's an inactive branch, talk to them about getting reactivated. If at the section level, perhaps hold events where professionals can receive continuing education, or just become a section leader or section officer, and encourage licensure to new young professionals that are out of school and are starting their career. And lastly, IEEE USA has a number of policy committees. Some look at licensure, but a lot of them need professionals, PEs or not, and that's a great place to start. And so in conclusion, I'll say the importance of being licensed boils down to protecting the health, safety, and welfare of the public. And licensing is, and I see privilege is spelled incorrectly there, but privilege in the sense that it's coming from a governing body. It's not a certificate from a association or a corporation. It's actually a law that so therefore it's a privilege to be licensed. And then likely holding a degree in engineering means you studied in the field, and you have this you are an engineer. I had a role model tell me once, the PE is kind of can be considered as the highest calling. Not to say anything about one that's got a PhD or pursuing that path. They're two different things. And so he said the PE was consider it as the highest calling. And I'll leave it with that as there's see if there's any questions that maybe I didn't cover or where those might have some additional clarification. So with that, I'll turn it back to Jonathan.
All right, fantastic. Thank you so much, Bob. Really great presentation. A lot of info, very comprehensive. So we do have quite a few questions from our audience, folks. We'll try to get to as many of your questions as we can. I know we're reaching the end of the hour. Also, please note that a lot of the important links that Bob provided during his presentation, I've also shared in the comments and chat section, so you can scroll through them and find them as needed. Um, all right. So Bob, first question. Our audience member Ahmed asks, can I take the PE exam before FE? Does having a PhD waive the need for an FE?
So no to that second question, and I know to the first question that Ahmad had. And when I give these responses, you really need to specifically check with your state. But typically you're not going to get waived the FE in this, in this environment. There's no, in the past there was some level of grandfathering. I think that's pretty much been eliminated. But again, check with your licensing board.
Great. Thanks for the question, Ahmed. And thank you, Bob. Next question from Christopher. There are an extreme number of FE prep courses. How can one go about working with the university or more sure refresher source to prepare for the exam, particularly asking for 15 years post graduation?
Yes, so Christopher, I think you're asking how to evaluate a good course versus a poor course, and that is a good question. And there's not an easy answer. The first thing you could do is self-study. If you got your old textbooks or you can obtain those, that's ideal if you're one that's comfortable to doing that. But having said that, there are some that have been around for a while. PPI Publishing used to be the one of the big ones, and they've been absorbed by Kaplan. I'm I'm not advocating them versus not. I just know that they've been around. But you're right. There's many others if you do a Google search. I think at the end of the day, you're going to be able to tell who's which ones are suitable, and you want one that's going to give you some practice exams available. You can get some practice exams through the NCSS portal, but that's really what you're probably after. You want it. There's different certain style of questions that's asked, and just repetitive look at those is important. And I think that's really what you're after. Most of the theory in that you probably remember. Most of the theory you've seen, and you don't want to spend a lot of time rehashing that because that takes time from practicing questions. So I don't hear you, Jonathan.
I'm so sorry.
Did I leave
Uh,
you?
Sorry about that. Thank you. Question is, what about licensing individuals with engineering bachelor's degrees outside the U.S.? I know one of our audience members gave his input that international bachelor's degrees should qualify but must be APED accredited. Any thoughts on that, Bob?
Yeah. So the NCSS does offer a credentialing service, and they will do just that. They'll go out and look at your program where you got your undergraduate degree, and they will credential it. There is a cost associated with it, and that will determine if then you can take the FE. I would consult with the NCSS website for more information, but that's a possibility.
Great, thanks for the question. Next question. Sorry, one second, just scrolling through them. Are references from current PEs required in addition to passing the PE exam? If so, how does one find a PE to potentially find a reference? It's not obvious who at our audience member's workplace who is a PE and who isn't.
Right. Very, very good question. And so the first part of the question is those references are going to vary by state of what's required. So again, consult their website. But when a PE is required and you need to seek one out, if you don't have if you don't know of any readily available at your place of business, what I would encourage you to do is look getting involved with your local, either your IEEE section. So might be becoming an IEEE member, or even NSPE, and their local units or chapters. But getting involved with them and actually going to the meetings. Don't I don't mean just attending a Zoom meeting, but when they do have luncheons or things like that where a speaker comes in, you're bound and the topic might be related to licensure. A lot of times, if it's NSPE, they have a lot of meetings on highway design, or maybe for IEEE, you might have something related to power. A lot of PEs are in the power industry, so you that's a good event to attend. But again, getting active, and then you may not find PEs at an event, but you can ask some of the people that do show up, or you can access their newsletter, or their maybe an email distribution list, and find them. It may just take a little seeking out, but it's a much easier. That's the easy job. Getting the experience and taking the exams are going to be much more challenging for you. So don't be discouraged if you don't know of any offhand. That should not be the item that really blocks you from obtaining the PE.
Thanks for that insight, Bob. This next question, how is the licensure process with a master's in engineering plus PhD later? For instance, in areas such like artificial intelligence as an example.
Yeah, so where credit is given for an MS degree, and I'm not aware of any states that do anything additional for a PhD. The MS degree criteria is typically an advanced engineering degree. And it's likely to have to be from a school that has at least that degree as an undergraduate that's accredited. So while a lot of schools don't accredit their graduate programs, if it's an MS in electrical engineering, the university should have a undergraduate program, or your undergraduate program that you came from. It doesn't have to be the same school. Will have to be an ABET accredited program. And I don't believe artificial intelligence fits under the EAC portion of the ABET accreditation yet.
Awesome. Thanks for that insight, Bob, and thanks for the question. Next question, Mohammed asks, do you need to serve under PE after getting an FE to gain acceptable experience? And before we get to that, I know, Bob, you covered that. And folks, I did link the source to Bob's slide from earlier on acceptable experience in the chat as well, in case you need visual reference. But Bob, if you just like to quickly answer that real quick, whether they need one or not.
Sure, Mohammed. And the reference I gave in the talk was really from the state of Texas, and only so because they had their information readily available. But again, this is a question that's going to come down to what the state is going to accept. And so sometimes you can get that pretty clearly from the website, but at the very least, confirm that website by picking up the phone and calling them, or visiting their office. And really, if a lot of those board members are volunteers, so they might be one in your city, so you don't have to travel to the state capitol. But visit with them and sit down, that would probably be a good experience anyway. But doing so, then, you get a clear understanding, this is your experience, and, is that acceptable by state law? Again, states are recognizing that there's not as many in a lot of these jobs in industry and other areas. You know, you don't have the supervisor that's a PE, because there's not the requirement to get licensed as there is in other areas for industry or education. And so the boards understand that, and so there's going to be some, I think, laxivity or leniency to allow that to be somewhat loose. So don't be deterred right now until you have that conversation with them.
Thanks, Mohammed, for the question. Um, and Bob, I know we've just reached the end of the hour, and we still do have quite a few questions left. Would you happen to have 10 more minutes to stick around and answer a few more questions?
Sure.
Okay, fantastic, folks. So, all right, this next question, Chris asks, is engineering training from the early 80s the same as the FE today?
Yeah. So Chris, the FE is the actual exam, the fundamentals of engineering. That's the exam that you take, the 110 question, and so sometimes that's called the EIT exam, the EI exam. The You're right. The EIT kind of is an older term. I think it moved to EI, dropped the training, and it became engineering intern. But they're all synonymous. But again, EIT is actually the the status you receive upon. So you have to pass the exam, but you're not necessarily an EIT till you actually receive something tangible from your state board that says you are an EIT. And what that does, there's nothing, um, you know, legal, anything legal binding with that. It's they if they give you something, it's a certificate or a recognition that you are an engineer in training. You've reached that level. You've satisfied the FE, and so it's kind of a level. But nonetheless, it's something tangible to hand to your employer if you're looking to use that as whether maybe a promotion to reach that. That's something to be very delighted to receive. And so it's not a requirement to go out and obtain once you pass the FE. The state's not going to care if you have that certificate. They're going to look at your results of your FE. But there might be also some nominal fee to pick up that EIT certificate, you know, $10, $20 possibly.
Awesome. Thanks for that, Bob. And thanks for the question, Chris. Um, Audience member asks, what about people later in their working career who already have the work experience? Do they take the FE and then the PE right after?
Yes. So your experience is based on when the time the clock starts when you receive your undergraduate engineering degree, not when you receive the not when you pass the FE. So you can get your experience first and then take your FE and your PE. But your FE needs, I bel I believe most states, the FE precedes the PE. I'm not aware that a PE can precede an FE, but that's certainly allowed, and that's common for those that maybe are in a career that they want to then look at going into something, a new area. And so you've gathered a lot of experience, and that's valuable. So start, focusing on passing your FE and your PE.
Awesome. Thank you, Bob. This next one's a really great question. Is the PE lifetime exam, or does your professional license, engineering license, last a lifetime, or do you need to renew it every once in a while?
So you do need to renew it, and what you're renewing isn't, you're not having to retake the exam. Your renewal is you need to pay the state. So there's a to be licensed, and every state has a different amount, but there's a charge that's, it's just like a fee to have your license. And so you're gonna, if it's a 2-year renewal, you'll send them a check every 2 years. Uh, but there is also a number of states require continuing education credits, so you can renew if you've achieved those credits. So there's a two-prong approach there. Not only send in your check, but satisfy the number of hours that's needed. And I will say too, it's very common for people that do practice in areas where licensure is more required to have multi-state licenses. And NCWS record makes that much more convenient. However, you're still going to have to pay each state that renewal fee. You're still going to have to meet the individual hours that are needed. Sometimes those hours overlap and you can count the same courses, but it becomes a little bit more challenging in bookkeeping when you have multi-state licenses. So you don't gain a lot unless you specifically need to seal a document from a different state. So I wouldn't get another state license just to say you have multi-state licenses. It's not a big challenge to reach that goal, but you do have to take on an extra burden.
Gotcha. Thanks for that, Bob. Let's see. Next question. Any thoughts on taking a second PE exam? Say one's already passed an electrical PE. Any advantage to, excuse me, any advantage to taking a second one in another PE?
So there would be if your state licenses by discipline. And again, it's state dependent, but if you have a state that's where licensure is not discipline specific. For example, I'm a PE. I'm not a electrical PE in Missouri. So I could conceivably, if I was practicing in my area of expertise, which could be mechanical engineering, I could go out and use my same PE. It all comes down to your area of expertise. Having said that, again, some states will say if you want to practice, if you're an electrical engineer and you want to now practice in control systems, then you would have to get licensed in that area. Now, having said that, electrical and control systems are very overlapping, so may not need to. That's something you got to really research with your state.
Awesome. Thanks for the question. And I really like your name, the Green Lantern. This next question. I hold a bachelor's degree in electrical engineering from a foreign university. What option in this case do I have in this case to get a PE? And I think we kind of, the foreign university is not showing in the ABED list. What option do I have in this case to get a PE?
Yeah, again, visiting the NCWS credentialing service would probably be what you want. I don't have a lot of experience with that. I know of a few students that went through that and thought it was fairly straightforward. There is a charge for that. I don't know what the going rate is, but try that. The other option is maybe talk to your state to see you know what what you might be able to do. If you need to go through a full new undergraduate program to go through that process. That's something perhaps bring up with the state if a credential for that university is not available through NCWS.
And folks, I have just reposted the NCWS website in the chat section. This next question, Andrew asks, do the state IEEE chapters have some kind of program that helps people navigate the various steps to become licensed? Andrew, definitely would check your state or local section's website if they have one. But I've also posted a link to our IEEE USA licensure committee, just in case you licensure and registration committee, just in case you'd like more information about that as well. But Bob, any insight from personal experience?
Yeah. So a couple of you know, I guess getting the vernacular right. So IEEE, that so they do have chapters, but their sections are what are more oriented towards meeting on at the member and geographic level. But keep in mind, IEEE doesn't organize by state, and so some sections will vary. If a state has multiple sections, more populous states do. You can certainly try different sections to see if they do. A lot of sections will, some I should say some sections might have a refresher course that you can purchase. Also, but check your NSPE. NSPE actually organizes by state. They have a state society under the national society. They might have a refresher course if that's what you're trying to obtain. And likewise, check your local. Maybe the local universities may have that. I know in St. Louis, there's the chapter has a professional engineering refresher course that's available in person in the spring that does quite well. So that's an option too.
Awesome. Thank you, Bob. And thanks for that question, Andrew. So, folks, unfortunately, we are out of time. I know we had a lot of questions that we couldn't get to. Again, you can refer to all the links that we've provided in the comments and chat section. Also, this webinar will be archived in our channel, so you can access it on demand at any time after the live broadcast ends. Bob, we really appreciate you joining us today and giving our audience your insight into the benefits of becoming a licensed professional engineer. Really, really appreciated having you today.
Thank you.
And folks, and thank you to everyone for joining us today and for your great questions. As mentioned at the beginning of the webinar, we'll be sending a short survey to all registrants after this event and would love your feedback. Please don't forget to share, like, and subscribe to our channels on social media and check back daily for future live stream updates. Have a great day, everyone.
Thank you.